Hello, and welcome to the Renaissance on Learning the Social Sciences. What was the Renaissance? Well, the term Renaissance itself was not actually coined until the 1850s. It was first used by a historian, Jules Michelet, and from there it actually took off. So if you would have lived during the Renaissance, you wouldn't have been saying you lived during the Renaissance. Now, the medieval Europe was a feudal society where thought was mainly dominated by the Catholic Church in the West and the Orthodox Church in the East. The economy was mainly agricultural, and most of the people, did not notice any change from their day to day life for hundreds of years, mainly because of feudalism. However, the Renaissance started to show some changing dynamics in the society and the politics of Europe during this time period. So, as we go through our lecture series on the Renaissance, I want you to just sit back and ask yourself a few questions. What are some of the characteristics that distinguish the Renaissance from the Middle Ages? Why do we have this sudden separation in terms of how we recognize this time period? What are the changes and continuities as Europe moved into this new age? How in the world did politics and economics impact the era that is very much known for writing and art? How did humanism impact then that art and literature? And what was life like during the Renaissance for the vast majority of people that lived within Europe? So we're first going to ask, why Italy? Well, Italy started to have a revival of commerce and town building much quicker than the rest of Europe during this time period. They were highly involved in trade. Now, this is actually going to be one of the reasons why Spain and Portugal go and hop on some boats to try to find ways to get over to Asia. It's mainly because the Muslim empires, the caliphates, are controlling a lot of the trade, and then the Italians in Venice and in Genoa are also really controlling the trade on the Mediterranean. And so they're able to kind of hike up these prices once again as they have come across the Silk Road and eventually make their way to Spain and Portugal, England, and other locations. So Italy is having this kind of booming commercial age start. And feudalism also has much less of a grip in Italy than in other areas of Europe. They have a city-state setup. So Italy itself does not actually exist yet. It's not going to exist until the 1860s. And so since they do not have feudalism, social mobility is possible. You're going to have some families that would have been unknown in the 1200s or unknown in the 1300s suddenly become huge names within Italy in the 1400s. Also within Italy, you have this presence of the classical era. You have the remains of Rome right there, the Colosseum, the aqueducts, everything throughout this whole peninsula. You're going to see constant reminders of what the human mind can do and what humans can build. And they are trying to recapture this era during this time period. Geography also is assisting them in other ways, just like besides trade. Obviously, Italy has always benefited on the trade market because they do stick out into the Mediterranean and they're kind of that halfway point in the Mediterranean. However, they also have access to raw materials. You have mining up in the north, you always have this access to timber, and you have great fertile fields all over the place to be able to sustain a large city population, which is why Italy is going to have the largest cities in Europe during this time period when you're thinking of Western Europe. So, as we go through, and discuss Italy, like I have mentioned, you have city states. We do not have a united continent. So we have in the south, we've got Naples, we've got the papal state, Rome itself controlled by the Pope. And with that, we do have a different little concept on how the papacy is looking at this time compared to modern time. For example, Pope Julius II is going to be kind of known as a warrior pope. He spends more time going out to war than sitting in the Vatican discussing theology. But we do have the papal state. We have Florence, of course, this beautiful birthplace of the Renaissance, which is a republic, but also is ruled by the major guilds and the major families that are in control. Milan, we also have major families that are there. That we have the Visconti family, and then eventually the Sforzas coming in. And they're also going to be doing things like hiring mercenary soldiers to go out and expand and start conquering other locations next to them. And then we have Venice, which is a very powerful trade city. They have an oligarchy that is ruled by the Great Council and also has other aspects to it that we will be talking about later in a different lecture. There are other city states besides these five main ones, but Italy itself is positioned well economically. So, while discussing the Renaissance, we have to think about the three phases. From 1350 to 1400, we do have this declining population due to the Black Death. Yes, it strikes in the 1340s, however, it does keep resurging, and places like Florence are hit really bad by the Black Death, and really bad again in some of these other waves that come later. Now, this is also, though, a time period that because of the Crusades, because Constantinople is under threat, that we do have this revival of the classical texts and the study of the classical texts in Italy and other locations. And we also have, in this time period, artists coming out that are starting to experiment with various other art forms. Now, of course, we have really that like Renaissance era that we know from the 1400s through the 1500s. And this is when we are going to have that boom and explosion come out with various artists painting and doing sculptures. And we're also going to be seeing stable governments that are going to really help feed this era because with stable governments, people are just kind of focused on making money and the economy. And if you are wealthy during this time period, you need to go and pay off various artists to go and show your wealth by having them do art for you. And so it's all good until we reach the 1490s. And then we are going to have invasions by the French and invasions by the Spanish, which is going to radically transform the Italian political life and bring about the end of the Renaissance. So, going back to the city life and what it is like, 1 in 4 Italians are living in the city. This is drastically different than if you would be in France, where you're having 80 to 90% living basically as a peasant and they're farming. Now, we also have the large cities of Europe being in Italy. 7 out of the 10 largest European cities are in Italy, and and 3 of them are having and maintaining a population over 100,000. They have rebounded from the time period of the Black Death, and their economies are doing just fine. So, we also do have this class setup within Italy where we have the old rich, and now because times are good, we're having this new class coming in, the new rich, and then we have small business owners and the poor. In Italy, also because it has different avenues for income, like for example, in northern Italy, you have textiles, you have mining, you also have printing, you have, of course, farming throughout all of Italy, and you have these cities that are highly involved in trade. Italy is just positioned well to kind of handle economic storms that may or may not ever come. So, if you're thinking about what helps make the Renaissance start in Italy, it is really this economic base that you have. throughout this entire time period until things are messed up when the French and the Spanish invade. Just to put another example on there, France, or sorry, not France, Florence, in their textile industry, they have around 30,000 workers just working in the textile industry. So those are great jobs. Not necessarily, I wouldn't have actually probably wanted to work in the textile industry back then, but they're great jobs in terms of providing people with a steady income. So they do have that. And they also have a lot of banking going on in Florence. Now, I'm not going to be too pleased with some of the interest rates that are going to be offered during this time period. Going and getting a loan from the Medicis with a 30% interest. I'm not going to be too happy about that. But you do have, these economic avenues open that you don't necessarily have in other locations at this time period. Another major thing that is coming out is humanism. Now, humanism is the scholarly study of Greek and Latin classics and the ancient church fathers in hopes of reviving worthy ancient values. Notice I did say in there the ancient church fathers. This is not secular humanism. Secular humanism is a little bit different because they are going to separate themselves from religion. But right now, it's still humanism, where we still have this look at the ancient church fathers or the Bible. So that is why you have artists of this time period like Botticelli going and painting Venus and going and painting all of this art with which is just drastically jumping into mythology, and then also going and painting all of this religious Christian artwork too. You're going to have this overlap going on. Also, this time period, we're going to be seeing the push for studying the humanities, going more so than just kind of these three major college offerings of the time period of theology, law, or medicine, and having people going and studying rhetoric, history, philosophy, politics. Europe is starting to expand in terms of what they are concentrating on for knowledge. And also, Italian humanists are searching out for manuscript collections, and they are just building up their Greek and Latin libraries like nothing else. And so there is just this fascination for humans and their potential. And it's going to be seen in the literature, it's going to be seen in the philosophy and the writing, and the education, the politics, and of course, the artwork that is going to be coming out during this time period. So I'm going to be ending with just that revival of the Greek studies. So educational reforms guided by ideals of useful education and becoming a well-rounded person is kind of, stemming from this study of the Greek classical texts. The Florentine Academy was not necessarily a formal school, but just this gathering of influential Florentines that were going and looking and reading at Plato's work, at Aristotle's work, and trying to now shape their society, their knowledge based off of this information. And so the Renaissance is also this rebirth of bringing back the works of the classical era and examining them. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to follow all of them, but they're at least going to be reading them again. Yes, they are going to follow some of it, and some of it's not going to be necessarily right. Hashtag Aristotle, oops. But they are going to have some items that are right in there. So thank you for listening to part 1 on our Renaissance lecture. Please like and subscribe below and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.